Bangkok, September 1971. The Rajadamnern Stadium on a Wednesday evening carries a specific weight in the air that you notice before you can name it. Part humidity, part cigarette smoke, part the accumulated energy of thousands of nights where real things happen to real people in a real ring. The crowd is not there to be entertained in any passive sense. They are there to witness, to see what happens when two people step into a space and find out what is true between them. Bruce is in the 14th row. He came because he has been in Thailand for 6 weeks filming and has been writing letters back to a contact in Hong Kong about Muay Thai technique, asking specific questions about how certain kicks generate power differently from anything he had trained in, and the contact eventually told him to stop writing letters and go watch. So he went. He bought a ticket at the gate the same as anyone else, and found a seat somewhere in the middle of the stadium, and he has been watching for 2 hours with the quality of attention he brings to anything that teaches him something, which is the same quality of attention he brings to everything. He is wearing plain clothes. Nobody in the stadium knows who he is. A few people near him have looked at him the way people look at faces they half recognize but can't place, that specific suspended expression of someone whose memory is working without quite arriving. Nobody has placed him. He is just a man in the 14th row, watching Muay Thai on a Wednesday night. The third fight of the evening ends and the crowd settles into the intermission noise, conversations restarting, people moving toward the refreshment stands, the energy of the room releasing slightly before the next bout. Then the announcer calls for attention, and a fighter climbs through the ropes with a microphone. Her name is Kanya Siriporn, 24 years old, and she has been fighting professionally for 5 years. Her record is 31 wins, 1 loss, the loss coming in her second professional fight, 3 years ago, against a more experienced opponent, and she has not lost since. 29 consecutive wins, 22 by knockout or technical stoppage, 7 by decision in fights that were rarely close. She is not famous outside Thailand in the way that certain fighters become famous outside their own countries. Inside Thailand, she is known. The sporting press has written about her with increasing seriousness over the past 2 years, covering her fights with the attention usually reserved for male champions, which is itself a statement about what her record has forced people to acknowledge. She stands in the center of the ring, holding the microphone, and she looks comfortable there, the way people look comfortable in spaces they have been in many times before. She says she wants to make an offer. She says she has been watching foreign visitors come to Thailand to study Muay Thai for years, watching them arrive with their black belts and their tournament records and their claims about what their systems could do. And she has watched them leave having learned something important about the difference between theory and reality. She says she has nothing against foreign martial arts. She says she has enormous respect for practitioners who have dedicated their lives to their disciplines. She says she simply wants to know if any of them work. She holds up a folded piece of paper. She says it contains 20,000 Thai baht. She says she will give it to any person in the stadium tonight who can last 90 seconds with her. Not win, not score points, simply last. 90 seconds without the referee stopping the fight. The crowd responds with the specific energy that crowds generate when something unscheduled has started happening, that shift from passive observation to active anticipation. 2 men from the crowd accept over the next 10 minutes. The first is a large man who climbs through the ropes with confidence and lasts 31 seconds before a knee to the midsection in the clinch produces the specific consequence that makes continuing impractical. He is not seriously hurt, but he is finished, and he leaves the ring with the careful movements of someone who has just learned something expensive. The second man is smaller and faster and clearly has some training behind him. He lasts 57 seconds, which is the longest anyone has ever lasted against Kanya in these open challenges, which she does perhaps once every 2 months when the mood takes her. He gets to 57 seconds by being extremely defensive and extremely mobile, and at 57 seconds, a spinning elbow finds him in a moment of insufficient mobility, and the referee stops it. She stands in the center of the ring and looks at the crowd. Bruce is sitting in the 14th row thinking about the spinning elbow. He has been watching Kanya for 40 minutes, and he has been doing what he always does, reading the pattern underneath the technique, looking for the principles that the surface of the fighting reveals to someone who knows how to look. He has noticed 3 things about her that he finds genuinely interesting, all of them relating to timing rather than power, all of them suggesting that what makes her exceptional isn't what it looks like from the outside. He is not thinking about accepting the challenge. He came to watch, not to fight. He is in Thailand to make a film and to learn, not to create an incident in a boxing stadium on a Wednesday evening. Kanya says into the microphone that she appreciates the courage of the 2 men who came up. She says courage is not nothing. She says the 90 seconds is still available to anyone willing to try. She looks at the crowd the way fighters look at crowds, not the way performers look at crowds. With the comprehensive peripheral attention of someone who is reading the room for information, rather than looking for approval. Her eyes find Bruce. This is worth understanding. She doesn't know who he is. She has no more information about him than about anyone else in those seats. She sees a man sitting very still, while the people around him are shifting and talking and doing the things people do during intermissions. The stillness is what registers, the specific quality of it. She has been in enough gymnasiums and enough fights to know that most people who are genuinely calm don't have to perform the calmness. It just is. This man's stillness is the genuine kind, not the performed kind, and that difference registers somewhere in her body before it registers in her conscious mind. She points at him, not dramatically, just the specific gesture of someone who has made a choice. You, she says in Thai, the man who hasn't moved. The people around Bruce turn to look at him. He looks up toward the ring. Their eyes meet at the distance of 14 rows. He doesn't move for a moment. He is making a decision. Not about whether he can do this. He already knows what the answer to that question is. He is deciding whether to do it. Whether this is the situation that warrants it. Whether coming up there serves something real or just creates a story. He looks at Kanya in the ring. He looks at the two men who came up before him, one of them still near the corner rubbing his midsection carefully. He looks at the crowd, which is watching him, waiting. He stands up. The walk from the 14th row to the ring takes longer than the distance suggests because the crowd is dense and he has to move through it. And as he moves through it, the recognition that didn't quite arrive when he was sitting starts arriving for some of the people he passes, triggered by the way he moves. That specific quality of motion that photographs poorly and looks different in person. A few people say something. He acknowledges them briefly and keeps moving. By the time he reaches the ring apron, a portion of the stadium has understood what is happening. The wave of recognition moves through the sections faster now, past person to person, and the noise of the crowd changes character in the specific way it changes when a large number of people are simultaneously revising their understanding of what they are watching. Kanya watches him approach from the ring. She reads him the way she reads all challengers, with the comprehensive physical attention of someone who has developed a sophisticated intake process over 5 years of professional fighting. She reads the way he climbs the steps, the way he moves through the ropes, the way he stands when he arrives at the center. She doesn't revise her approach. Whatever she has observed, she keeps her method. She is respectful of good technique when she sees it, and she has just seen something that qualifies. But she is also undefeated across 29 fights, and she is in her ring, and she has offered 90 seconds. A referee materializes and establishes terms quietly. Both acknowledge them. Kanya looks at him. "You know what you're doing?" she asks in Thai. "I know something," he says in Thai, that carries the accent of someone who learned it carefully and recently. She almost smiles. She raises her guard. He stands in the relaxed non-stance that people who don't know what they are looking at consistently misread, and people who do know consistently find the most unsettling thing in any room. The timekeeper indicates ready. She comes forward. She opens with a teep, the Muay Thai push kick, aimed at establishing range and creating the distance she wants to work from. It is not tentative. It is a real technique, at real speed, designed to produce real information. He isn't there. He moved at an angle, small and lateral, and the teep extended into nothing. She reads this immediately. Not a retreat, an angle. She files the information and comes back with a low kick, trying his lead leg, testing the conditioning there. He checks it. His shin meets hers with a sound that carries to the nearby rows, the specific sound of conditioned bone meeting conditioned bone. She notes this. He has been conditioning his shins, which means he has been preparing for this kind of exchange deliberately, not in the last few weeks, for longer. She throws a combination. Jab to cross to left kick, the foundational sequence she has used to open exchanges for 5 years, the one that sets everything else up. She throws it with genuine speed and real intention. He slips the jab by making his head move in a direction that conflicts with the jab's expectation. The cross passes over his shoulder. The kick he steps inside of, getting close enough that it can't develop full power, and from the inside position his right hand touches her floating ribs. Light contact, specific placement, enough for her to understand where she is and what just happened without enough force to produce damage. She steps back. She looks at him. 20 seconds. The crowd has stopped producing the usual ambient noise of a large gathering. 3,000 people, and the quiet is the kind you only get when everyone has decided simultaneously that what is happening is worth more than anything they might say to each other. She comes with the clinch. This is her strongest position, where her knees have ended more fights than any other technique, where her elbows come from angles that the opponent can't fully see until they arrive. She establishes the grip on the back of his neck. the tie that controls the head and removes the opponent's ability to create space. She doesn't get the grip. He has moved his head offline from her reaching hands, not back, to the side, and her hands close on air that was adjacent to his neck rather than his neck itself. Her forward commitment has carried her close, and his right hand has found the inside of her left elbow, a light redirecting touch, and she has turned slightly off her intended axis. She recovers. She is very good at recovering. 29 fights of professional competition produce recovery that happens below conscious thought. She reestablishes position and comes back with a right elbow, close range, the technique she trusts most. His head is 4 inches away from where the elbow is going. The elbow passes through nothing productive. She feels his hand touch her shoulder from the inside. Another placement. Another point of contact that arrives before her technique has resolved. 45 seconds. She stops moving. This is not giving up. This is doing what very good fighters do when something isn't working, which is stopping and looking at it rather than continuing to apply the thing that isn't working. She looks at him. He is standing where he was, hands at his sides, weight balanced in the way that looks like no particular readiness and is something else entirely. She says in Thai, "You're not fighting back." He says, "You haven't given me a reason to yet." She processes this. It is not arrogance. The tone is wrong for arrogance. It is something else. The statement of someone who is operating from a different set of premises about what this exchange is for. She comes at him with full commitment. Everything she has, all the technique across 5 years and 29 fights and 10,000 training sessions. She comes with the intent to find out what this person actually is, rather than what the surface of the exchange has shown her so far. He moves through it. Inside the combinations rather than around them, finding the space between the techniques, the half-second gaps where her commitment to one technique creates the condition for the next, and in those gaps, his hands make contact, light and specific, always controlled, always showing rather than using the available force. He is marking her. In 4 distinct places over the next 15 seconds, his hands find her face, her ribs, her shoulder, her jaw. 4 contacts, none of them hard enough to produce damage, all of them precise enough to communicate exactly where the damage could have been. 70 seconds. She makes a decision. She throws her spinning elbow, the technique that ended the second challenger at 57 seconds, coming from a setup she has built specifically for this, the setup that has worked every time she has used it. He steps inside the rotation. Inside the arc of the spinning elbow is a position that the technique cannot reach, because the rotation requires distance to complete. From inside the arc, he is where the technique's geometry cannot find him, and his right hand stops at her jaw, 2 inches away, touching nothing. He holds it there. The stadium is completely silent. He looks at her across the small distance of 2 inches. His hand is at her jaw. His expression contains no triumph, no performance. He looks at her, the way you look at someone you have been having a real conversation with. He lowers his hand. He steps back. 90 seconds. The timekeeper's bell sounds. Kanya stands in the center of the ring. Her breathing is elevated, not from exhaustion, from the intensity of sustained maximum effort. She is looking at Bruce with an expression that has moved through several things in the last 30 seconds and arrived somewhere that is still sorting itself out. The crowd finds its voice, and it comes out all at once. The specific collective release of 3,000 people who have been holding something for 90 seconds and are now allowing it out. Kanya doesn't acknowledge the crowd. She is looking at Bruce. She says in Thai, "I didn't feel you move." He says, "You were very good. The spinning elbow is real. The setup was real. I had to be paying very close attention." She says, "You could have hit me." He says, "Yes." She says, "Several times." He says, "Yes." She looks at him for a moment. The sorting out in her expression has arrived somewhere. She says, "Why didn't you?" He says, "Because that wasn't the question." She looks at him. What was the question? He says, "Whether what I do works when someone with your skill is genuinely trying." That was the question. The answer turned out to be yes. Hitting you hard wasn't required to answer it. She is quiet for a moment. 3,000 people are making noise around them, and she is quiet in the middle of it. She says, "Who are you?" He gives her his name. She doesn't know it yet, not the way the rest of the world will know it in 2 years, but she knows enough from the fighting community to know that she has just learned something significant about who she spent 90 seconds with. She picks up the folded paper from the corner. She holds it out to him. He shakes his head. She says, "You lasted 90 seconds. He says, "I didn't come up for the money." She looks at him. "Then why did you come up?" He thinks about this honestly before answering. He says, "Because you pointed at me, and because the offer was genuine." and because refusing it would have been a kind of dishonesty. She absorbs this. Then she says, "What did you learn?" He says, "Your timing is better than I expected. The spinning elbow setup has 3 steps before the elbow, and all 3 steps look like different techniques. I didn't see the 3rd step clearly until the 2nd time you ran it." She says, "You were watching for it the 2nd time." He says, "Yes. By then I knew the sequence." She says, "You learn fast." He says, "You teach clearly. Your technique says exactly what it means." She looks at him for a moment longer, then she hands him the folded paper anyway. He accepts it. He turns and looks out at the crowd, and then at a section of the upper tier where, if you knew where to look, a small group of young fighters from a local training school had been given complimentary seats. They are watching with the specific attention of young people who have just witnessed something they will be thinking about for a long time. He walks to the ropes and holds the paper over them in the direction of the training school's coach, who is sitting in the aisle nearby. He says a few words. The coach looks at the paper. He looks at Bruce. He says something in Thai. Bruce nods. The coach takes the paper. Kanya has been watching this from the center of the ring. She walks to where Bruce is standing at the ropes. She says, "You know about that school?" He says, "Someone mentioned it. They need better equipment. The money will help." She looks at him. Then she looks at the coach. Then she looks back at Bruce. She says, "That's a strange thing to do." He says, "Is it?" She thinks about it. Then she says, "No, I suppose it isn't." She pauses. "I train 12-year-olds on Tuesday mornings, girls mostly. I tell them that the fight is about more than winning, that what you take out of the ring should be worth more than what you brought in." He says, "That's good teaching." She says, "Tonight I think I received some of my own lesson back." He looks at her. "What lesson?" She says, "That the question being asked determines what counts as an answer." He nods. Then he says, "Your spinning elbow, the 3rd step in the setup. What are you watching for when you decide to throw it?" She looks at him. This is not the question she expected. She answers it, specifically and technically, and he listens with the quality of attention that she will describe to her students for years as the most complete attention she has ever been given by anyone in a conversation about technique. They talk for 20 minutes. The stadium empties around them. The ring crew waits with patient professionalism for the conversation to end, so they can begin the next bout setup. Neither Kanya nor Bruce notices the waiting crew. They are working through the mechanics of the spinning elbow entry, and what it requires, and what it reveals when it doesn't land, and the conversation has the quality of 2 people discovering that their different paths have led them to adjacent truths, and that the adjacency is more interesting than the difference. The ring crew eventually, gently, makes itself known. They separate at the ring steps, both heading different directions out of the stadium. At the steps, she says, "If you're still in Bangkok next week, come to my gym. Tuesday morning. I have 12-year-old girls who should see that conversation happen." He says he will try. She nods. Then she says, "I'm glad I pointed at you." He says, "I'm glad you did too." He walks out into the Bangkok night. The street outside the stadium is busy with the post-event crowd and the smell of food from nearby stalls and the sound of tuk-tuks and the particular nighttime quality of a city that never quite stops. He walks through it thinking about the spinning elbow, about the 3 steps in the setup, about what the 3rd step is actually watching for before it commits. He is already turning it into something he will use in his own work, something that will find its way into his notebooks in the days ahead, alongside diagrams and questions and the specific technical notes that he kept throughout his life, with the dedicated attention of someone who understood that the work was never finished. He was right to come to watch. He was right to stand up. The evening taught him something and cost him nothing, and gave something to 12-year-old girls he had never met. That is the complete accounting. That is what the 90 seconds were for.